Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. All praises are Allah's, Lord of the worlds. And may His peace and blessings be upon our Master, the Holy Prophet Muhammad, and his pure immaculate Ahlul Bayt. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajjal farajah. Last night we touched on a very important theme, and that was the fact that the stories of the Holy Quran and the stories in the traditions of the Ahlul Bayt, these are stories of the soul. In addition to being events that did occur once upon a time, and in addition to the superficial aspect, there are many inner and esoteric layers to these stories. Inner layers that define the soul, that tell you what you are, who I am, and man's identity is being disclosed through these stories. And we gave an example of one of the stories in the Holy Quran, and then we came to the story of Ashura, and we said in the story of Ashura there were many characters when it speaks of Qasim alayhis-salaam, because the soul, mine and yours, there's a Qasimi dimension to be fulfilled. We have to take that line that Qasim took. There's a Abbasi dimension, Habibi, Hurri, and so on and so forth. Then we came to Imam Husayn alayhis-salaam. And we said that in the maqtals, these codes of salvation for the soul are infiltrated. There are a lot of them. Then we came to this statement of Imam Husayn alayhis-salaam, which we want to open up tonight, where he said on the plains of Karbala, Muli'at butunukum min al-haram. Your insides have been filled with haram. And we said that the insides, it's not just the physical stomach, it's the soul. And the soul is being filled up with haram. This haram doesn't mean what is haram according to the Sharia alone, that they consumed the flesh of pigs, for example, or they consumed the flesh of animals not slaughtered Islamically, because most of the people in the army, they were abiding by the Sharia to the dot. It wasn't this haram which was the problem. So we said we have to open this up esoterically. Inna lil Qur'an dhahran wa batnan wa li batnihi batna ila sab'ati abtan. With the Quran, there's a superficial aspect, there's an inner aspect. In this inner aspect, there's another inner aspect. Go 7 times over. In some traditions, it says 700. In some, 7,000. The point is, it's infinite. Yes, there is a superficial meaning, a prima facie meaning you benefit from, but that same verse has an infinite number of meanings. That's one point. So what were these haram actions that made people go anti-Husayn alayhis-salaam? This has to be opened up. If we just limit it to the superficial aspect, we've lost the plot. Muli'at butunukum min al-haram. Your insides have been filled with haram. Now there's one verse in the Holy Quran which we want to open up in some detail tonight, where it explains what the haram is. But before that, just one point, just to remind, and maybe there are new faces today, just to remind you again that, remember when we spoke about Irfan and the science of Irfan, and we said there are many people who have seen beyond the physical. They've had visions, apparitions. They've received angels, something which is open for everyone according to the verse that we read. Remember, تَتَنَزَّلُ عَلَيْهِمُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ. The angels will descend upon them if their aqa'id, their actions are steadfast. Some people see. They see beyond. It may happen to me and you momentarily now and again. But some people have these deep experiences, irfani experiences. And they see beyond the physical. What they see sometimes is in relation to the realities of the cosmos. They see heaven, they see hell. And sometimes they see an imam, the barzakhi reality, giving them advice in relation to a number of steps to reach Allah. But sometimes these people, and it's open to everyone, they see the inner dimensions of the Quran, of the verses of the Quran. That's also open to everyone. These inner dimensions of the Quran and the science of these esoteric dimensions, which is called the science of ta'wil, it's different to tafsir. In tafsir, it's in relation to the external prima facie meaning of the verse. And that was revealed in a certain context, the occasions of revelation. You just can't speak anything about the external meaning. You have to apply what exactly happened, the context and what was said, why it was said. You can't just make something up. That would be personal opinion, tafsir bil-ra'i. Although Allama Tabatabai had another understanding, which was much deeper, but that's the common understanding. But in relation to the inner esoteric dimensions, there are criterion to stick by. But only the ma'soom, first of all, can definitively say what the butun, the esoteric dimensions of the verses of the Quran is. That's the first point. However, the non-ma'soomeen have the right, as long as they go through the correct principles of the science of ta'wil, they have the right to go into the esoteric dimensions, but they have to say, maybe this is the meaning. There's an infinite number of meanings behind each verse. Infinite. These people, they see through their spirituality, they've gone beyond the physical. They've seen that some of the esoteric meanings behind the verses of the Quran, and they've written it down for me and you to benefit from. But it's always maybe. But there are criteria in the science of ta'wil. They just back it up with the logic of the traditions. If they back it up with the logic of the statements of the ma'soom, or if they back it up with rationality, if they back it up with the logic of the Holy Quran, it becomes hujjah. Because they've traced it back to the Quran and the ma'soom. And there are around 20 criteria that they use. It's a science in itself. And the criteria are broadly divided into 4, but I don't want to go into the science of ta'wil. But Imam Khomeini says we shouldn't bar people from expressing their visions in this regard, because you're barring the masses from the inner truths. Now, we want to understand, when the Holy Imam said your insides are filled with haram, naturally it wasn't merely and solely the physical haram, the Sharia haram, because we know many people, they abided by the Sharia. So there must be other meanings for haram. In the Quran, there's a verse we want to go through, and I'm going to share with you what some of the urafa have seen in this verse to get guidance of what we shouldn't fill ourselves with, and therefore, by default, be Husayni. Because you can't be Husayni by default by merely abiding by the superficial aspect of the Sharia. There's more to that. Okay. Now I'll just first go through and just translate. It's my own translation, but it's chapter 5, verse number 3. Now for many people, when I said 5:3, it rings a bell. Al-yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum. That comes at the end of the verse. Or in the middle of the verse, rather. Now, the start of the verse is حُرِّمَتْ عَلَيْكُمُ الْمَيْتَةُ وَالدَّمُ وَلَحْمُ الْخِنْزِيرِ وَمَا أُهِلَّ لِغَيْرِ اللَّهِ بِهِ. Starts with saying that prohibited upon you, forbidden for you, is the corpse. You can't consume a carcass, an animal that just dies naturally without being slaughtered Islamically. You can't consume blood. You can't consume the flesh of pigs. And that which has been dedicated to other than Allah, it has to be slaughtered in a particular fashion. Okay, now the point is, this is the beginning of the verse. And this verse was revealed during the early phases of Islam. But then we see at the end of the same verse, or in the middle of the same verse, Al-yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum. Why? Because that was revealed at the end of the 23 years. The popular answer given is that the Holy Messenger, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, would many times, it's been recorded, that he would get these very sensitive verses and he would arrange them and put them in the middle of these verses which are speaking about the Sharia, very simple verses. Why? They say, the scholars say, this is the popular opinion, that it's because they can't be gotten rid of. The enemies can't just get, if it was all in a separate chapter, it may have been under attack. Like this, they put it under these verses that everyone has access to, and it would make it more difficult for the enemies to get rid of it. So they put it in between. He said, put this verse here. Chapter 33, verse 33, for example, put it in between another issue. And that's okay, that's understandable, it's a legitimate position. But the point is, that's not it though. Maybe there's another delicate understanding too. Why this al-yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum, why it was put in the middle of this verse in particular. That which was revealed after 23 years, yes, religion is perfected now, especially with walaya being stamped. Now the Sharia is complete, it's all ready. But now we're going into an esoteric understanding. This begins and finds another meaning. If you esoterically, in real terms, in haqiqi terms, want your religion to be perfected, حُرِّمَتْ عَلَيْكُمُ الْمَيْتَةُ. Now it starts. Now, so the verse reads, forbidden for you is the carcass, blood, and the flesh of pigs, that which is dedicated to other than Allah. وَالْمُنْخَنِقَةُ وَالْمَوْغُوذَةُ. Animals that die, that are strangled to death. Yes, according to the Sharia, you can't consume those animals. Those beaten to death, وَالْمُتَرَدِّيَةُ. Those who are fallen to death, they fall from a high place down. It's all the Sharia here. We're just translating. Then we'll go into the esoteric. وَالنَّتِيهَةُ. They're gored to death or horned to death. وَمَا أَكَلَ السَّبُعُ إِلَّا مَا ذَكَّيْتُمْ, and that which the predators consume, save barring that which you can purify. وَمَا ذُبِحَ عَلَى النُّصُبِ, those animals that are slaughtered on stone altars. وَأَن تَسْتَقْسِمُوا بِالْأَزْلَامِ, and it's forbidden for you to divide by rifling arrows. ذَلِكُمْ فِسْقٌ, these are all transgressions. الْيَوْمَ, today, يَئِسَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا مِنْ دِينِكُمْ, those who are disbelievers, today, now, they are despaired of your religion. See, this was revealed at the end. It's come here, though, after those things that are forbidden. See, there's a reason why. But the reason has to be found in the verse, esoterically. فَلَا تَخْشَوْهُمْ, don't be scared of them. وَاخْشَوْنِي, fear me. الْيَوْمَ أَكْمَلْتُ لَكُمْ دِينَكُمْ, today I've perfected your religion. وَأَتْمَمْتُ عَلَيْكُمْ نِعْمَتِي, I've completed my blessings over you. وَرَضِيتُ لَكُمُ الْإِسْلَامَ دِينًا, and I've approved Islam as your religion. That happened at the end of 23 years. But it's here for a purpose, though. It's an indicator to see if your religion is perfected, if Allah's blessings has been completed over you, and if your Islam is approved, it needs more just sufficing with the superficial aspect. What do we have to do? Now let's go through these one by one, going through the esoteric dimensions. حُرِّمَتْ عَلَيْكُمُ الْمَيْتَةُ. Yes, the superficial meaning is you can't consume animals' carcasses, that they died naturally, they weren't slaughtered Islamically. Well, no one in this room consumes such meat. If it was that easy, if only that it was that easy. This is just a minimum. You have to not want me to keep on repeating the minimums to you from the pulpit. I have to keep on telling you what's haram, what's wajib. You should know all these things. Me just repeating and regurgitating everything, it's a sign that people aren't growing if they still need to know. You have to be tired of people like me just giving you this level. You have to grow, though. It can't just be that. This book is an eternal book. It's a comprehensive book until the day of resurrection. This is man's salvation. It's not that easy. Was it just a simple, you don't eat a carcass, you don't consume blood? Who's consuming blood today? Maybe those days there were people. But what about today? Is that an issue we're having? Does anyone drink blood, for example? See, there are deeper meanings here. What is the mater? What is the blood? Here the Imams have spoken about this. This person who has written his visions on this verse that he has seen, but they're all backed with the logic of the traditions of the Ahlul Bayt and the Quran, and therefore it's of value and proof for me and you to benefit from. مُلِئَتْ بُطُونُكُم مِّنَ الْحَرَامِ, your insides have been filled with haram. What is this haram? Number one, because the inside, we said, is not the physical stomach, it's the soul. What is the soul being filled with, which is haram? Number one, al-maytatu, the carcass, the corpse. Traditions now help us. Ad-dunya jifatun. The dunya is the carcass. The dunya is the corpse. ما هذه الحياة الدنيا إلا لهو ولعب. This worldly life is nothing but deviation and play and amusement. And I think it continues like this: وَإِنَّ الدَّارَ الْآخِرَةَ لَهِيَ الْحَيَوَانِ. But the metaphysical, beyond this realm, the abode of the hereafter, that's the real life. We want to see, whilst living in this world, we want to see, have access to the metaphysical. Otherwise we're going to be spiritually blind. Man kana fi hadhihi a'ma, fahuwa fil akhirati a'ma. If you're going to be blind, you're going to be blind in the hereafter too. You have to get rid of the deviation, there's another better translation for la. And you have to get rid of this amusement, this play. The worldly life isn't just to play around with. You have to act Allah fully. Whenever you act Allah lessly, in whatever you do, at the start of the day to the end, there has to be Allah in the equation in order for you to grow. Otherwise the dunya, it's a corpse. If you get drowned in the dunya, you're the corpse. One who's drowned in the world. You're not growing, you're dead. You're alive on a par with the criteria of life given by the physicians, but the spiritual physicians regard you as dead. What damo? See, now you see, that's number one. You have to get rid of the worldly glitter and not be drowned in it. You want to be Husayni. Sorry, it's a bit more difficult than the superficial aspect of the Sharia. Number one, you get rid of the worldly life to the best of your capacity. And the story of Talut was referring to that last night. What damo? What was blood? Blood, according to the logic of the traditions, is when one is drowned in one's animalistic whims, one's nutritional, sexual appetites. You put in, everything has a limit. You're a human. Just because the Sharia says it's halal to have this and that and do this and that, you're a human though. There's a limit to everything. You want to grow. Okay, you'll be given heaven for abiding by the Sharia, but you want much more. You have to control your nutritional appetite, control your sexual appetite. Don't be animalistic. وَلَحْمُ الْخِنْزِيرِ, and the flesh of pigs. Well, how many people consume the flesh of pigs today? Is that it? These pigs that we see, just don't consume them. Finished, let's go to the next verse. There has to be something much deeper. The traditions tell us each verse has an infinite number of esoteric dimensions. Now someone has bothered with their spirituality. They've endeavored, they've seen things which are on a par with the traditions. Then we just put them aside and discard. Just look at the way we're barring people from salvation. وَلَحْمُ الْخِنْزِيرِ, what's that? Because the pig has these spiritual abstract vices associated with it. It's mentioned in the traditions. One of them is an absence of zeal, of ghayrah. They don't have that. We need to be zealous in our religion. Otherwise you'd be acting pigly. Also the greed factor. This is prohibited upon you. Not only eating the physical pig, but greed, absence of zealous. It's you filled your souls with greed. You filled your souls with an absence of zeal, religious zeal. You can't be Husayni. You're just fooling yourself. Yesterday we spoke about the effects of animals, what they have. With the pig, you consume pig meat, you'll acquire pig attributes. Look, it's a rational thing. No one should be offended or be totally surprised. Why does Islam say choose good friends? Because when you choose a bad friend, not even in Islam, humanity, you choose a bad friend, the bad attributes of that bad friend will transfer to you. Everyone accepts that. What is it that's transferring to you? It's animalistic attributes. Their vice, their animalistic bad traits, it transfers, we see it. It's a fact. But it's these animalistic attributes which is being transferred. Now, if you eat something, the animal itself, it becomes more easily transferred than being associated or being friends with an animal, for example. وَمَا أُحِلَّ لِغَيْرِ اللَّهِ بِهِ. Also prohibited is that which is offered or dedicated to other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We'll come to that later. Then it goes into 4 classes of animals. وَالْمُنْخَنِقَةُ وَالْمَوْقُوذَةُ. Animals that are strangled to death. Okay, you can't consume those animals. Animals that are beaten to death, according to the Sharia, you can't consume the flesh of those animals. In this case, of cattle, for example. A cow, sheep, camel that is beaten to death, that is strangled to death, you can't consume. Okay, that's the Sharia. What are the inner meanings here? Here, the Urafa have said, and they say maybe, but this is what they've seen, that, but before I say that, just one point. In the Quran, whenever there's mention of animals, as I said, it's a story of the soul. It's a story of what man can be. And we have so many traditions on this, that a man will appear as a pig, as an ape, as a wolf, and so on and so forth. So when you see an animal in the Quran, it's a state of the soul. Some people have seen the metaphysical dimensions of these animals. وَالْمُنْخَنِقَةُ. An animal that is strangled to death. Okay, in addition to the superficial meaning, what does this represent? And also the animal that is beaten to death. What do these two represent? And they've said that those who strangle their souls out of endeavor and beat their souls out of endeavor with proper Islamic etiquettes and disciplines that exist. They strangle the soul. So that the soul, the ego doesn't enhance. They strangled it. And they beat their soul so the ego doesn't ever be precipitated. They control their ego. However, it was done out of riya and sum'ah. What seemed on the external side was very good. They strangled the soul. They beat their souls. There was no ego. But what they did was out of riya and sum'ah. Riya and sum'ah, they have a common denomination where it's a kind of ostentation before others. But with riya, you want others to see your actions. With sum'ah, you want people to hear you. The way you speak to people, you do it out of ostentation. So people like me here are under threat. It's all riya. They do strangle the ego. They beat the soul. But it's all done out of riya. Do you know the strangled animal, or the animal which is beaten to death, for example? How does that differ to an animal who has been slaughtered the Islamic way? They almost look the same. You see, riya, they look the same. The animal that is strangled to death and the animal who's beaten to death and the one that is slaughtered Islamically, they look the same here. But one is haram to consume, one is permitted. Here these people, like the real urafa, like the real spiritual people, they strangle their egos, they strangle themselves, they beat themselves like other, but they do it out of riya. They publicize it. So people see, people hear. Such people will be embodied as such animals in the hereafter. وَالْمُتَرَدِّيَةُ وَالنَّتِيحَةُ. And the animal that is fallen to death from high places falls down and dies. And the animal that is gored to death. Here they say that one who spiritually throws oneself from a high position of knowledge and action to the lowest of positions, that throwing oneself down, by means of what action? Now this is what he's seen. He's been told this. By means of constantly finding faults with people, arguing unnecessarily, and goring them, poking them, wanting to, hurt them. Now this is something, especially amongst the scholars, it's very, very common. They have to be careful. They want to just express their superiority in knowledge, in asceticism, and they do it in the worst possible ways. They belittle people, keep on finding faults with people, never themselves. Keep on arguing. It applies to other than the scholars too, but maybe more with the scholars. These people will be represented in the hereafter as such animals, as gored to death, fallen to death. وَمَا أَكَلَ السَّبُعُ إِلَّا مَا ذَكَّيْتُمْ. Also prohibited upon you, forbidden for you, is that which the predators disfigure, mutilate. The story behind it is in hunting, when an animal, let's say a hound dog for example, injures a sheep. Then the hunter goes, the sheep has been injured, has been disfigured. However, the sheep is still alive. Okay, here, if the sheep died, it's prohibited for you to consume the sheep by the time you got there. But if it's alive still, albeit injured, you can slaughter it Islamically. That's the superficial aspect to the verse. Now, esoterically, the butun, what does that refer to? Don't be like the predators who feed off the rot of the dunya, the flesh of the dunya, with their paws of greed. Save that which you can purify. I'll come to that in a minute. But this verse maybe can be referring to where capitalism goes out of control, where some predators are nurtured and they feed off the world with their paws of greed. Don't be like that. Don't get drowned in such a system. Save that which you can purify. That bit of the dunya which is necessary at the end of the day. As long as it's pure, that's okay. But don't overdo it. Don't be a predator. وَمَا ذُبِحَ عَلَى النُّصُبِ. And prohibited also is the sacrificing of animals on the stone altars. They used to have these stone altars, and for their idols, they would sacrifice the animal on the stone altar. Is anyone doing that today? So do we say this verse is extinct? No. Doesn't matter if no one does it. This verse has an infinite number of esoteric dimensions. And here the Urafa have said, look, this is like you when you sacrifice your soul for worldly incentives. So we've all failed there, because that's what we do. That's like spirituality-wise. Metaphysically, it's like us sacrificing the animal on a stone altar. That's the worth. When you sacrifice your soul, you endeavor a lot for worldly incentives. So, assuming there's one or two of you that aren't like that though, and then it says even for incentives of the hereafter. Even when you sacrifice and endeavor too much for incentives of the hereafter. Why? First of all, I don't want people to panic. You stick to the Sharia, do the minimum, you'll have heaven. I'm just giving you the potential that we have, the potential of what we can be. Well, you shouldn't even think of, let alone, you shouldn't think of the worldly incentives, but you shouldn't even think of the heavenly incentives. In the beginning, we all think of that. That's the way the Ahlul Bayt have invited us to put us on the way. They've attracted us with some of the more materialistic pleasures so that we go on the way, but we can't suffice with that. Pleasures of an immaterial nature is waiting before us. Seeing the truths, seeing the Imams, the angels, and so on and so forth. But if you do certain things for heaven, that's concealed shirk. It's not haram. But the veils of darkness are veiling over you. You give sadaqah, you give charity, so that your illness goes, or the illness of your child goes. Well, when you give charity, you're sacrificing from your pocket. But you're doing it for a worldly thing. You want the illness of your child to get better. That's a minimum. It's not bad. It's good. We all start like that. Sufficing with this is not good. I'm sorry if I keep repeating myself, because it's important. I don't want people to get the wrong idea. The Sharia, that's the red line. That's a must, and that's a first step. It's just that we have another 101 steps awaiting. If you suffice with it, it's a pity. That's it. You do Salatul Layl, so your worldly sustenance increases. You're sacrificing yourself, the animal within, on a stone altar. It's concealed shirk. Why? What's the definition of this concealed shirk? Where Allah is used as a means, not as an ends. When Allah is used as a means to something, be that something worldly or hereafterly, no, that's concealed shirk. It's not the open type of shirk, which is haram according to the Sharia. But this is haram according to the tariqah. مُلِئَتْ بُطُونُكُم مِّنَ الْحَرَامِ. Yes, this haram now is deeper than just a mere letter of the law. See, these things are important. You have to do everything for Allah's satisfaction. Like a man and woman. Sometimes the husband does something for the wife so that the wife cooks something good that night. He's doing something good for the wife, but it's for the cuisine that he's doing it. It's not for her. But sometimes you do something for the wife because of who she is. That's important now. The same applies with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but this is the main thing. You use Allah as an end in Himself, not as a means. You do Salatul Layl to go to heaven, shirk. It's the sawab, there's reward for it. Don't get me wrong, but you won't be growing. Everything has to be done for Allah, and if it's done for Allah, you'll never get disappointed. You can evaluate yourselves. For example, I write a scientific paper, and then someone steals my paper and puts it in his name. And then I get very disappointed. Yes, I have a Sharia right to get disappointed. I have a right to go and get my justice. But if I truly did it for Allah, okay, he stole it, I'll forgive him. Allah knows it was for him. Why should I convince others that it was mine? Innal izzata lillah jami'a. All honor is Allah's. You can't find honor from other than Allah. But if we get angry, it's because, it's that shirk again. It's not, there was no Allah. Allah was just used as a means. You invite someone to your house, and then they never invite you to their house, for example. Sorry with the example. You can think of better examples, and then you get disappointed. Why didn't they invite us? Why did you invite them in the first place then? There was no Allah in the picture. And then the problems arise when Ziyarat Ashura, reading the Quran, and even these actions can be done in a manner where Allah is used as a means, and therefore that can be concealed shirk. Why are you reading the Quran? In Irfan, whatever is used in a manner where Allah is used as a means, they're called an idol. You have to be careful not to slaughter yourself through your endeavors for the idol. And now with this verse, with the meanings of the verse, now there's a reason why, maybe one of the reasons why al-yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum has been brought here. You do all these esoterically, in esoteric real terms, your religion will be perfected. Allah's blessings will be completed over you. Allah will approve of this Islam now that you've acquired for yourself. مُلِئَتْ بُطُونُكُم مِّنَ الْحَرَامِ. Only once you've perfected this, now you have the audacity to say, I am Husayni. وصلى الله على محمد وعلى الطاهرين.